1 hour ago, courtroom gasps as footage shows. Diddy sneaking into Kim Porter's room. Everyone shocks. The courtroom was not ready. At 2:07 p.m., what was expected to be a procedural, almost routine day in federal court abruptly shifted. A sealed piece of evidence quietly whispered about for days was finally cleared for viewing. As two monitors were wheeled in and the lights dimmed, no one spoke. Not the press. Not the defense. Not even Diddy. Then the screen flickered to life. It was black and white. Grainy. A timestamp in the top right corner read 2:00 a.m., November 13th, 2018. The camera angle showed a long hallway inside Kim Porter's Tuca Lake home. At first, the image seemed mundane home surveillance from a quiet night. But then came the movement. A figure, barefoot, hooded, walking with quiet, deliberate steps. Gasps echoed as the face came into view. It was unmistakable. Diddy. No disguise. No hesitation. He moved through the hall like he had done it 100 times before. The jury sat motionless. The gallery froze. Diddy reached the end of the hallway, Kim's bedroom door, and paused. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just turned the knob and walked inside. 12 seconds of static followed, then nothing. The hallway was empty. The door closed. No footage of him leaving. No explanation. Just a void. The prosecutor allowed the silence in the courtroom to linger like smoke. Then with precision, ladies and gentlemen, this is what was recorded 3 nights before Ms. Porter was found dead in that home. From that moment, the courtroom knew this wasn't about tabloid scandal anymore. This was something else. What had once been speculation now bore the sharp edges of implication. The video wasn't just a curiosity, it was a fracture line cutting across the story the world thought it knew. But that wasn't the only reveal. Because Kim Porter, they learned, had been preparing to talk. In the weeks leading to her death, Kim Porter wasn't just dealing with a persistent illness. She was writing, documenting, sending encrypted messages. She had reached out to a prominent investigative journalist. And she was scared. Not paranoid, not dramatic, just scared like someone being watched. Her final text, time-stamped at 2:10 a.m., read, "I think he's in the house." 1 minute later, the camera caught Diddy entering her hallway. That text was never opened. She would be pronounced dead less than 72 hours later. The prosecution's narrative tightened like a noose. Kim Porter wasn't a bystander in Diddy's world. She was its quiet observer, a confidant, a mother, but also, according to court testimony, the keeper of secrets that could collapse an empire. And in her own words, recovered from journal entries, voicemails, and a haunting email draft, she was ready to speak. In a passage from her October 2018 journal, Kim wrote, "If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident." That line was shown on a projector screen above the courtroom. Several jurors visibly swallowed hard. Inside the courtroom, tension built on tension. Digital forensics painted the next disturbing frame. According to the expert, the footage glitch wasn't a hardware malfunction, it was manual. Remote access, root credentials, admin override. Someone had shut the feed down. Only 3 people had access to those credentials. Kim Porter, her head of security, and Sean Diddy Combs. The expert testified no other logins, no brute force attempts, no backup feed tampering, just a clean, single-purpose access. At the exact second, the footage goes black. The defense argued coincidence. The gallery didn't buy it, because the face on that footage, the one staring straight at the hallway, camera before entering Kim's bedroom, didn't belong to someone caught off guard. It belonged to someone who knew he wouldn't be seen. Or so he thought. But here's where the story begins to shift. Because while the world watched a powerful man sit under the weight of video evidence, another force quietly gained momentum. Kim Porter's own voice. Her thoughts, her fears, her receipts. And as the next part of the trial unfolded, it became clear this wasn't just a case against Diddy. It was the vindication of a woman who had refused to be erased. The prosecutor didn't waste time. As the lights brightened and murmurs rose in the courtroom, he motioned toward the next piece of evidence, a journal. Kim Porter's own handwriting page after page, each dated meticulously. October 2018, November 1st, November 5th. The entries read like emotional autopsies, fear laced through clarity, truth veiled in caution. In one entry she wrote, "They think I'll stay quiet forever, but I'm tired." In another, "If I ever tell the full story, none of them survive it." The courtroom had gone silent again, not out of fear, but reverence. Because this was no longer hearsay. It was confession. Testimony from the grave. The prosecution then introduced a new player, an investigative journalist, name sealed for protection. In a sworn deposition, this reporter revealed that Kim had been preparing to go public. She had documents, party schedules, names, signed NDAs, mentions of controlled substances, hush arrangements, pressure on emerging artists. She wanted to do it right, the journalist said. No revenge, just exposure. Kim was planning a memoir. She had already contacted a lawyer about rights risks protection. "I don't want revenge," one text read. "I just want the truth out before it's too late." The defense objected lack of direct evidence, hearsay, emotional manipulation. The judge overruled, because it wasn't just texts. It was strategy. Kim Porter had been building a case. Quietly, diligently, like someone who knew the cost of visibility and was ready to pay it. And just as this narrative settled into the courtroom's bloodstream, the prosecution pivoted to the night of her death. 9:30 p.m., November 12th. Kim's teenage daughters left the house with their cousin. By 10:45, Kim was seen on interior footage, tea in hand, heading to bed. At 2:11 a.m., Diddy entered through the side door. No alarm, no call, no lights. Only the hallway camera caught him. That feed now infamous cut to static the moment he opened her bedroom door. According to security logs, remote access occurred at 2:14 a.m., a root login, manual deactivation of that single feed. The rest of the system continued recording uninterrupted. This wasn't a glitch. It was a scalpel. The jury stared, pale, motionless, haunted. Then came the moment that changed everything. A still frame. Zoomed in. Diddy standing at the end of the hallway, eyes locked directly on the lens. He saw the camera. He stared right into it, and walked forward anyway. The prosecutor held the image high. This is not a man who was surprised to be caught. This is a man who expected to be invisible. From the gallery, someone audibly exhaled. And for the first time, the defense didn't interrupt. Because the visual told its own story. And Kim's words were still fresh in the jury's minds. He used to tell me, "No one will believe you. I am the narrative." But now, for the first time, she was being believed. Not as a warning, not as a cautionary tale, as a witness. The prosecution called one last surprise witness, Dr. Helen Mahoney, an independent forensic pathologist. She'd reviewed Kim Porter's original autopsy report. Her conclusion was damning. This was not pneumonia, she said. Not with these toxicology levels, not with this timeline. According to her analysis, Kim showed no clinical symptoms in the days before her death. No fever, no coughing, no signs of a fatal infection. But there were high levels of sedatives too high for simple sleep aid use, she said. These are levels we see in surgical prep or chemical restraint. Worse, a request for a second toxicology panel had been made and denied. That request, the log showed, was canceled within 24 hours. Before the funeral. Before the press got wind. Before the truth could catch up. When asked if foul play could be ruled out, Dr. Mahoney didn't hesitate. No, not with what I've seen. There are too many closed doors here. This needs to be reopened. Back in the courtroom, the weight shifted. Diddy, who had spent the trial in a composed posture, now leaned forward. His hands clutched the defense table. His jaw tensed. His whispering turned frantic. A sketch artist captured it all. Jaw-locked fingers, twitching facade, cracking. He wasn't in control anymore. And just like that, the narrative had flipped. What started as a mysterious death now pulsed with something darker intention. Because Kim Porter hadn't just left behind memories. She left behind evidence. By day 11, the gallery was at capacity. Reporters lined the back wall, sketch artists filled the benches, and the air was heavy, not just with anticipation, but with a quiet sense that something irreversible was happening. This was no longer just a trial. This was reckoning. And it started with a voicemail. The prosecution tapped play. Kim's voice, shaky, tired, nearly a whisper, rang out through the courtroom speakers. "He's back. I heard the gate. He's not supposed to be here, but the code still works. I locked my door. I'm scared." The timestamp, November 12th, 11th, 48 p.m., just 2.5 hours before Diddy entered her home. The voicemail had been left on her attorney's line. He never heard it until after her death. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman wiped away tears. The silence that followed was louder than the audio itself. Then came the text messages. Between November 10th and 14th, Kim had sent over 40 texts, some to her cousin, others to her attorney, and several to the unnamed journalist she had been working with. The final text was time-stamped 2:10 a.m. "I think he's in the house." It was sent 1 minute before Diddy was captured on video, entering her hallway. That message was never opened, and she was never seen alive again. The courtroom didn't need prompting anymore. Every new detail felt like another domino falling. The prosecutor moved swiftly. He pulled up digital logs, system-level files from Kim's surveillance system. An IP login, 2:14 a.m., secure credential, root-level access. Only 3 users had it. There were no signs of password tampering, no phishing attempts, no external breach. This wasn't a hacker. It was someone on the inside, someone trusted. The security consultant who installed the system confirmed under oath there is no way to access this system remotely without those credentials. There's no auto shut-off feature. This wasn't a bug. This was a decision. And the logs confirmed it. Only one feed was accessed, only one camera. Only during those 12 seconds. The implication was surgical. This was not panic. This was a digital erasure. The defense attempted to claw back control. They suggested interference, maybe a software update. The expert dismissed it. The last update was over 2 weeks before he said, "No errors, no outages, no low storage." This was deliberate. A juror scribbled furiously. Another looked straight at Diddy, expression blank, but jaw tight. And then the prosecution played their final card. An email. Never sent. Recovered from Kim's cloud backup. Dated November 11th. Subject line, "What I know about Puff." It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it read like a will. "This is the truth. I'm tired of carrying it. Tired of being quiet while people hurt others and get away with it." She detailed names, hotel bookings, NDA enforcement, secret parties, a timeline. She described pressured talent, celebrities who broke down, contracts signed under duress, mentions of fear, of control, of the stories no one dared to tell. But it was her final paragraph that broke the courtroom's collective breath. "He used to tell me, 'No one will believe you. I own the narrative. I am the story.' For a long time I believed him. But now I want people to know I tried. I spoke up. I put it in writing. And if I end up gone, I didn't go willingly." That single sentence reframed everything. Diddy wasn't just a man on trial. He was a man accused of silencing the only person who knew too much. The defense had no rebuttal. There was no way to refute a message verified by cloud timestamps, encryption records, and handwriting analysis. And for the first time, Diddy's posture faltered. He sat still, completely still. No whispering, no fidgeting, only stillness. And in that stillness, something shifted. This wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about control, about consequence, and about a woman whose final act wasn't just to warn, but to win. Because even in death, Kim Porter had made sure she would be heard. The prosecutor returned to the center of the courtroom this time, not with more evidence, but with a question. He pointed to the printed still frame of Diddy's face captured just before he entered Kim Porter's bedroom. "Mr. Combs," he said calmly, "do you remember what you did during those missing 12 seconds Because the system doesn't? Diddy didn't respond. He didn't flinch. But something in him cracked, and everyone saw it. His body language changed. No longer upright and composed, he leaned inward, both hands gripping the defense table. His lawyer whispered something, but Diddy didn't respond. His eyes locked onto the photo in front of him, his own face half lit by hallway surveillance. In that moment, there was no denial, no performance. Only calculation and a man suddenly unsure of how far the silence would stretch. The jury watched every move. One juror shifted his chair forward, as if to hear better. Another leaned back, arms crossed, not out of distance, but evaluation. The mask had slipped. And it wasn't just about what the footage showed. It was about what it didn't. For the first time, the prosecution didn't need to dramatize. The evidence had become its own story. The missing footage, the text messages, the sedatives, the blocked toxicology request, the draft email. Each piece was a puzzle fragment, and now the image was complete. Kim Porter wasn't just a tragic figure. She was the center of something far more calculated, something that had operated in silence and had counted on her staying silent too. But she didn't. Not really. She found ways to speak, and those words had now taken over the courtroom. The media response was immediate. Though no cameras were allowed inside, reporters outside the courthouse refreshed their feeds with rapid-fire summaries. Diddy cracks under pressure. Kim Porter's email shocks courtroom. Was this murder disguised as illness? Social media exploded. Hashtags trended globally. Shah justice for Kim. Diddy trial. Shah 12 seconds. But in the courtroom, the mood was restrained. This wasn't viral chaos. It was transformation. Each revelation was another layer peeled back, another illusion removed. The prosecution ended the day with a statement not rhetorical, not dramatic, just surgical. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, this is not yet a murder trial, but it is a trial about pattern power and silence. And Kim Porter was silenced. The statement landed like a gavel, and with that, the judge called a recess. As everyone stood, the air felt altered, thicker, slower. Jurors didn't speak. Reporters walked out in silence. Even the defense team seemed subdued. This wasn't about celebrity anymore. The courtroom had become a mirror, reflecting the cost of influence unchallenged. Diddy, who had once stood tall as the mogul of empires, was now something else entirely, a man whose legacy had become a question mark. But more than that, the trial had evolved into something no one could walk away from cleanly. Not the industry, not the press, not the audience who once looked away. Because the facts no longer whispered, they roared, and no one could unsee the truth that had emerged. In that silence, the narrative Kim Porter had once feared might die with her had in fact been reborn, piece by piece, by her own hand. The final day of arguments began without flair. No new footage, no sudden witness, just clarity. The prosecutor rose holding a single sheet of paper. Not an exhibit, not a legal document, just a printout of Kim Porter's final words, the email draft titled, "What I Know About Puff." He read the last paragraph again. I want people to know I tried. I spoke up. I put it in writing. And if I end up gone, I didn't go willingly. The courtroom was still. Not out of shock anymore, but solidarity. Because by now, everyone understood. This wasn't just a trial about an entry caught on tape or a glitchy surveillance system. It was about a woman's attempt to reclaim her voice in a world that profited from her silence. It was about the narrative Diddy thought he controlled the one he said he was, and it was about how that control had shattered. The prosecutor closed with one image, Diddy's face. That still frame from the hallway, eyes locked on the camera, the half shadow, the look of a man who thought he'd disappear into silence. He didn't expect you to see this, the prosecutor told the jury. He didn't expect this day to come. Then he pointed again to the system logs, the blacked out footage, the sedative levels, the blocked requests, the text messages, the draft email. All of that. That's not speculation. That's a story she left behind. She told us what to look for. She gave us everything except time. And with that, He stepped back. There was no need for dramatics. The truth had already spoken. As deliberations began, no one moved quickly. Outside the courthouse, the world argued over what it meant. Was it enough to bring criminal charges? Would there ever be justice that matched the magnitude of the silence? But inside, something more important had happened. Kim Porter was no longer a cautionary tale. No longer the woman who died of pneumonia. No longer the ex-girlfriend of a powerful man. She had become the architect of her own vindication. Not a victim. Not a footnote. A voice. One that refused to be buried. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the mood had shifted entirely. There was no verdict yet, but it almost didn't matter, because no matter the outcome, the world had already seen the footage, heard the voicemail, read the words. Kim had warned us, and for once the warning had been heard. In her absence, she had turned the tide. What Diddy had built with force, intimidation, and illusion was now collapsing under the weight of a story he never thought would see daylight. And that was her power. Not revenge, not exposure for its own sake, but truth. Even if it had to be written in static, preserved in drafts, whispered in the dark. The courtroom did not rise for her, but history would. And as the doors closed behind the jury, one thought echoed through everyone's mind. She didn't go willingly, and now we knew it. In the days that followed, the headlines kept coming. Networks debated. Analysts parsed the timeline. Legal experts appeared on nightly panels to dissect what had unraveled in that federal courtroom. But despite all the coverage, all the noise, one question refused to fade. Why didn't anyone stop it? Why didn't anyone act when Kim Porter sounded the alarm? That question echoed louder than any closing statement, because the evidence hadn't arrived all at once. It had come in fragments. A voicemail here, a message left unread, a system log altered by unseen hands. Each piece was small, dismissible on its own, but together they told a chilling truth. She had known. She had warned, and no one listened until it was too late. Outside the courtroom, fans and supporters began leaving flowers outside the Tuca Lake home where Kim once lived. Photos, candles, letters. One note read simply, "You were right. We see you now." Another, "He said no one would believe you, but we do." For her children, the story would never be just courtroom drama or trending hashtags. It would be the defining battle their mother fought, alone, terrified, but unwavering. It was her quiet resistance against a man who thought he was untouchable. And that resistance had now become something else. A reckoning. A shift in the very fabric of how power and silence are allowed to coexist. Industry insiders, once eager to defend Diddy or downplay rumors, began to distance themselves. Archived interviews were quietly pulled. Brand partnerships reevaluated. Collaborators issued vague statements of shock and support, most too late to matter. The public had made up its mind, but more than outrage, what lingered was reflection. How many other Kim Porters had been erased? How many stories never reached the draft stage? How many people in that same circle had seen the signs and looked away? Back in court, discussions were already forming around possible follow-up investigations. The evidence presented, while not conclusive for a murder charge yet, was enough to warrant federal review of the original cause of death, the corrupted footage, and the block toxicology expansion. The LAPD's prior assessment of no foul play was now under audit. The coroner's office issued a statement promising cooperation. But for those who sat in that courtroom, it wasn't about legal closure anymore. It was about moral clarity. And it belonged to Kim. In the final frames of the case file, there remained one unsent message. The last draft in her email archive. Undated, unaddressed, incomplete. It read only, "If anyone ever reads this, I hope you understand. I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid no one would care." But now they did. The courtroom had gasped, the jury had leaned in, and the world had listened. Not because of spectacle or fame or scandal, but because Kim Porter refused to be invisible. She wrote her story when no one else would. And in the end, it was her voice, not his, that endured.